President Trump's power struggle with Congress has now extended to this group of Republicans, which has been fairly bipartisan over the course of the last 2 years, the Senate Intel Committee, and it regards his oldest son. The Intel Committee has subpoenaed Donald Trump Jr. over the Trump campaign's contacts with Russia as outlined in the Mueller report.
Now, this came the same day Democrats moved toward holding Attorney General William Barr in contempt for refusing to provide them with the full unredacted report. Barr responded by suggesting the president claim executive privilege over the material, and the president took that advice. So Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill now, and Nancy's going to guide us through everything that's going on. But I think the most surprising thing is the most recent issue with the Republican-led committee, a Republican-led committee subpoenaing the president's son. The president already testified in front of this committee.
Right. You know, and as you say, the Senate Intelligence Committee is this sort of rare pond of bipartisanship. Here on Capitol Hill. They have really tried to work together, but it is still surprising, since it is controlled by Republicans, that they are issuing a subpoena for Don Trump Jr. to testify once again. He was here on the Hill back in 2017. He testified before their committee and the House Intelligence Committee. And just the other day, you had the Senate's Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, declaring case closed on this whole Russia investigation. But now one of his biggest committees is saying not so fast. Case is not closed at all. And the reason that they want to hear from Donald Trump Jr. again is because lawmakers have long suspected that he was not fully truthful when it came to a couple of big issues. One, that Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer who claimed to have dirt on Hillary Clinton, and two, his knowledge of a Trump Tower Moscow deal that his father was pursuing in the run-up to the 2016 election. And as you know, Congress doesn't like being lied to. They don't like being misled. And so clearly the Senate Intelligence Committee is looking to get some clarification on what he told them the first time around. We understand that there were talks going on to perhaps bring the president's son back in to testify voluntarily, but apparently those talks didn't go anywhere, which is why they had to go to this next step of issuing a subpoena compelling him to testify.
So, Nancy, what kind of heat, what kind of pressure are you hearing that Senator Richard Burr may face, not only from the majority leader? I saw Rand Paul tweeting about this, saying, look, the majority leader has said case closed. And ultimately, when the president gets wind of this, if he hasn't already, and starts tweeting about it, Senator Burr's going to face some pressure there.
Right. I mean, you already had the top Republican in the House, Kevin McCarthy, tweeting that this is unnecessary and that it's time to move on, sort of a rare rebuke of a fellow Republican. And there are these anonymous quotes that have made it into the press from associates and colleagues of Don Trump Jr., basically slamming the chairman, Richard Burr of North Carolina, calling him a so-called Republican, basically implying that he's a Democrat in disguise and that he's reporting to his true overlord, the top Democrat on the committee, Mark Warner of Virginia, which is not necessarily a smart move. You don't ever want to tick off the chair of a committee that is looking to compel you to testify. You know, you want to try to be making friends, not enemies. The challenge for this committee is going to be that, as we've seen again and again at this point, a subpoena does not really matter much to folks in the Trump inner circle or administration officials. The word has gone out from the president himself that it's fine to ignore these subpoenas, that he thinks that it's presidential harassment. And so if Donald Trump Jr. decides not to cooperate and not to show up, yes, Congress could try to go after him in the courts, but that is an extremely lengthy process.
So let's talk about this contempt of Congress decision by the House Judiciary Committee. We know that it's sort of almost, well, it kind of started a chain reaction, right? The Trump administration then went to the Justice Department to ask what they could do, and the Justice Department who is William Barr, suggested executive privilege. So now that they've claimed executive privilege on everything, the entire Mueller report, the underlying evidence, Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, was speaking to Major Garrett for his podcast. And Mick Mulvaney says now that that has happened, now that executive privilege has been claimed, the chances of Congress ever seeing the Mueller report are pretty much nil.
Right. So, that was a risk that Democrats had to take, because with the Attorney General refusing to go to a court to get permission to hand over a lot of this sensitive grand jury material, Democrats knew that they were in for a lengthy legal battle no matter what. So even if the Trump administration had not exerted executive privilege over this document, they were still going to have to battle this out in the courts. And so they decided, look, we're going to take a stand here. We're going to try to make an example of the Attorney General. And we're going to show that we are not going to back down when administration officials decide not to comply with congressional subpoenas. But Mulvaney is right. The fact that the president has exerted executive privilege does make things more complicated, even though Democrats argue that that's like trying to put the cat back in the bag. I mean, the report was already out before the president exerted executive privilege, and all this sensitive material that is in the unredacted version was already handed over by the president's aides and associates to Robert Mueller in the first place. That's when executive privilege was waived, when that material left their hands and became public, if you will, by giving it over to this special counsel investigation. And so they say you can't now retroactively apply executive privilege and say that that all that material is protected, especially after the Attorney General already offered a small group of congressional leaders the opportunity to read the mostly unredacted report if they wanted to. They just weren't allowed to talk about it with their colleagues, which is what really rankled Democrats. But to say now, okay, well, you did have the opportunity to read it, but now actually we're going to exert executive privilege. Democrats argue that that is a move that's not going to hold up in court.
Yeah. Nancy, thank you so much.